Welcome to the Alibis Exposed, where trust meets betrayal in the dark. You know, sometimes life throws the strangest surprises at you, and you don't realize what's happening until it's already too late. That's what happened to me. Honestly, I never thought I'd even entertain the idea of doing something like this, but here I am, telling you a story I wouldn't believe if someone else told me. It all started when my husband Dave got called away on a last-minute business trip. It wasn't unusual. His job required him to travel quite a bit. Still, this time felt different. Maybe it was the way he rushed out the door, barely giving me time to process that he'd be gone for 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks. He kissed me on the cheek, grabbed his bags and said, "I'll call you when I land." And just like that, he was gone. I didn't think much of it at first. I mean, I'm used to being alone when he's away. But later that evening, I got a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so naturally, I hesitated. I peeked through the peephole and saw Marcus, our new neighbor. Now, let me tell you about Marcus. He moved into the house next door about 6 months ago, and honestly, I didn't know much about him. I'd seen him a few times, waved hello here and there, but that was about it. Marcus was, well, let's just say he had a presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with this calm confidence about him, and he had the kind of smile that could light up a room. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. "Sorry to bother you, but I noticed your porch lights flickering. Thought I'd let you know." "Oh, thanks," I replied, suddenly very aware of the fact that I was wearing an old sweatshirt and yoga pants. "I've been meaning to fix that." "No problem. I've got some spare bulbs if you need one," he offered. "I could swap it out for you real quick." Normally, I'd politely decline, but something about his tone made me trust him. "That'd be great," I said, stepping aside to let him in. I watched as he worked on the light, his movements smooth and efficient. We made small talk, and I found myself laughing at his jokes more than I expected to. When he was done, he turned to me and said, "There you go, good as new." "Thank you so much, Marcus," I said.
"I owe you one," he grinned. "Don't mention it. That's what neighbors are for." As he left, I couldn't shake the strange feeling. It wasn't anything he said or did, it was just him, the way he carried himself, the way he seemed so at ease.
It was refreshing, especially since Dave and I had been stuck in a bit of a routine lately. I shook my head, trying to brush off the thought, but that was just the beginning. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "Let me know if you ever need help with anything else. Happy to lend a hand." My heart skipped a beat, and I couldn't understand why. I stared at the message for what felt like forever, my mind racing. Why was I
Overthinking this? It was just a friendly text, that's it, right? I typed back a quick, casual reply. "Thanks, Marcus." Short and sweet, no room for misinterpretation. But as I set my phone down, I couldn't help but feel something. Not guilt.
Not exactly, just this strange mix of curiosity and unease. I told myself it was nothing, and went to bed. The next morning, I got up, went about my day, and tried to put the whole thing out of my mind. But around noon, I remembered something. The faucet in the kitchen had been leaking for weeks. Dave promised to fix it, but, well, life happened. Normally, I'd just call a plumber, but something about Marcus's message lingered in the back of my mind, so I sent him a quick text. "Hey, Marcus, do you know anything about fixing faucets? Mine's been dripping non-stop, and it's driving me crazy." His response came almost immediately. "I can take a look. Be there in 10. 10 minutes later, there he was, standing at my door again, toolbox in hand. I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly put together he looked even in a simple t-shirt and jeans. "Show me the culprit," he said, with that easy grin. I led him to the kitchen, and as he got to work under the sink, I found myself chatting with him more than I expected. He told me about his job as a graphic designer, his love for cooking, and how he'd recently moved to the neighborhood after a bad breakup. "I figured a fresh start would do me good," he said, his voice steady but tinged with something deeper. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "Well, I'm glad you ended up here. You've been a great neighbor." "Thanks," he said, glancing up at me from under the sink. "It's nice to have someone to talk to. This place can get lonely sometimes." I didn't know what it was, maybe the way he said it, or maybe the fact that I'd been feeling a little lonely myself. But his words stuck with me. After about 20 minutes, he stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "All fixed," he said, turning the faucet handle to show me. "You're a lifesaver," I said, genuinely grateful. "How much do I owe you?" He laughed. "Nothing. Consider it payback for all the times I've borrowed your Wi-Fi when mine went down." I laughed too, though I couldn't remember ever giving him the password. "Well, thank you, really." He stayed for a bit longer, and we ended up talking over a cup of coffee. The conversation flowed so easily, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. When he finally left, I found myself staring at the empty coffee mugs on the table, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. That evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification from Instagram. Marcus had followed me. My thumb hovered over the notification, hesitating for a moment before I tapped follow back. Over the next few days, things between Marcus and me stayed normal. At least that's what I told myself. He'd wave when I walked out to check the mail, or he'd text me a random funny meme that had me laughing out loud. It felt harmless, even refreshing. But then came Saturday. I'd planned to spend the day catching up on chores, but as I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Hey, I'm grilling out later. Want to join? Just a casual thing." I froze for a second, unsure how to respond. Dave was still out of town and I didn't have any plans, but wasn't it weird? Then again, it was just a barbecue, a neighborly gesture, nothing more. "Sure, sounds great," I replied, before I could overthink it. A few hours later, I found myself standing in Marcus's backyard, holding a plate of grilled chicken and vegetables. The setup was simple but inviting, a small table with a checkered tablecloth, a portable grill, and a cooler filled with drinks. "It's not much, but it works," Marcus said as he handed me a soda. "It's perfect," I replied, and I meant it. There was something so relaxed about the whole thing, a welcome change from the formality of dinners with Dave's work colleagues. As we ate, we talked about everything and nothing, favorite movies, embarrassing childhood stories, even our worst cooking disasters. It felt so easy, so natural. At one point, Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked at me with a curious expression. "You know, you're not what I expected." I raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" He chuckled. "When I first moved in, I thought you'd be, I don't know, one of those distant neighbors who only waves out of obligation, but you're real down to earth." I felt my cheeks flush. "Well, I could say the same about you. You've been more helpful in the past week than some people have been in years." He smiled, and for a moment there was a silence that felt heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged like the air before a storm. I cleared my throat and stood up, breaking the moment. "I should probably get going. I've got a million things to do tomorrow." "Of course," Marcus said, standing as well. "Thanks for coming. It was nice having some company." "It was fun," I said, giving him a small smile. "Thanks for inviting me." As I walked back to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't anything Marcus said or did, it was more about me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed that much, felt that seen. That night, as I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone, I noticed Marcus had posted a photo
of the barbecue.
It was a candid shot of the table, but my plate was unmistakably in the frame. The caption read, "Good food, even better company." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. What did he mean by that? The next morning, I woke up with Marcus's Instagram post still on my mind. I couldn't tell if I was overthinking it or if there was something more to his words. Good food, even better company. Was it just a friendly nod to our barbecue, or was he trying to say something else? I shook it off and busied myself with errands, but as the day went on, my phone kept lighting up with his name. First, he sent me a funny meme, then a random message about how his coffee machine had broken and he was tragically under-caffeinated. Each message seemed so casual, but there was a warmth to them that I couldn't ignore. By the afternoon, I found myself standing in my kitchen, staring at the untouched groceries I just bought. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. "What's for dinner tonight? I might need to invite myself over if it's anything good." I laughed out loud without thinking. I replied, "Only if you don't mind takeout. Cooking isn't happening tonight." "Perfect. I'll bring dessert." It was so easy, too easy. But when he showed up that evening, I told myself it was still harmless. Neighbors share meals all the time, right? We sat in my living room, takeout boxes spread across the coffee table. Marcus brought a small container of chocolate mousse he'd made, which turned out to be better than anything I'd had in a restaurant. "You made this?" I asked, incredulous. He grinned. "Cooking's kind of my therapy. It's how I unwind." "Well, it's unfair how good this is," I said, taking another bite. The conversation flowed like it always did, but tonight there was something different in the air. The way he looked at me lingered just a little too long. The way I laughed at his jokes felt a little too free. At one point, Marcus leaned back on the couch, his expression thoughtful. "You're really easy to talk to, you know that?" I glanced at him, trying to keep my tone light. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," he said, his voice quieter now. "I don't think I've felt uncomfortable around someone in a long time." I didn't know how to respond. His words stirred something in me, a mix of guilt and something else I wasn't ready to name. I looked away, focusing on the empty takeout containers. "I should probably clean this up," I said, standing quickly. "I'll help," Marcus offered, following me into the kitchen. We worked in silence for a few minutes, but the air between us was thick with unspoken words. As I reached for a dish towel, our hands brushed, and I froze. It was such a small thing, but it sent a jolt through me. "Sorry," he said softly, stepping back. "It's fine," I said, avoiding his gaze. "Thanks for helping with the dishes." Marcus grabbed his jacket, sensing the shift in the mood. "I should get going. Thanks for dinner and for letting me crash your evening." "Any time," I said, forcing a smile. He hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say more, but then he nodded and walked out the door. As soon as the door closed, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "I hope I didn't overstep tonight. I just really enjoy being around you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, unsure of what to say or even what I should say. I read Marcus's message over and over, my mind racing. What did he mean? Was he just being kind, or was there more behind his words? My thumbs hovered over the keyboard as I tried to craft the perfect reply. Something casual, something that wouldn't encourage anything or stop it either. "You didn't overstep. It's nice having company while Dave's away." I hit send, and instantly regretted it. Why did I even mention Dave? Was I trying to remind him or myself that I was married? Marcus's response came quickly. Glad to hear that. Let me know if you ever need company again. I put my phone down, my stomach in knots. Part of me knew I should put some distance between us, but another part, a part I didn't want to admit existed, liked the attention. It had been a long time since someone looked at me the way Marcus did, since someone made me feel seen. The next few days passed uneventfully. I focused on work, ran errands, and avoided Marcus. But even as I kept my distance, I couldn't stop thinking about him, his laugh, the way he seemed to genuinely enjoy our conversations, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. Then on Friday, the silence broke. I was sitting in the backyard with a glass of wine trying to enjoy the evening when I heard his voice over the fence. "Hey, neighbor!" I looked up and saw Marcus leaning against the fence, a beer in his hand and that easy smile on his face. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Mind if I join you?" I hesitated, but only for a moment. "Sure." He climbed over the low part of the fence with the ease of someone who'd done it before. A few seconds later, he was sitting across from me, the night air filled with the quiet hum of crickets. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me," he said, his tone light, but his eyes searching mine. "Just busy," I said quickly, taking a sip of my wine. Marcus nodded, as if he didn't quite believe me. "I get it. Life gets in the way sometimes." For a while, we sat in silence, the kind that felt both comfortable and charged. Then he spoke again, his voice softer now. "You ever feel like you're stuck in a routine, like every day is the same and you're just going through the motions?" I looked at him, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I guess everyone feels that way at some point." He nodded, staring at his beer. "That's why I moved here. I needed a change, a chance to start over." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded, letting his words hang in the air. Then he looked at me, his eyes intense. "You're different, though. You make things feel lighter, like there's more to life than just the routine." I felt my heart skip a beat. The way he said it, the way he looked at me, it was too much. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the patio. "I should probably head inside," I said, my voice shaky. "It's getting late." Marcus stood too, his expression
unreadable. "Of course. Thanks for letting me crash your evening." "Any time," I said, automatically, though I wasn't sure I meant it. As I locked the door behind him, my phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. "I meant what I said out there. You're different." My hands trembled as I set the phone down,
wondering just how much longer I could walk this line before it all came crashing down. The days that followed were a mess of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the lingering pull Marcus had over me. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the memory of his words, his gaze, the way he made me feel like someone worth noticing. I told myself it was innocent, that nothing had happened, but deep down, I knew better. The line between friendship and something more was starting to blur, and I wasn't sure where it would lead, or if I even wanted to stop it. Then, on Wednesday evening, everything escalated. It was pouring rain, one of those unexpected summer storms that drenches everything in minutes. I was curled up on the couch watching a movie when there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Marcus standing there, soaked to the bone, holding a bottle of wine. "Marcus, what are you doing out in this weather?" I asked, stepping aside to let him in. "My power's out," he said, shaking water from his hair. "Figured I'd see if your lights were still on and bring this as a peace offering for intruding." held up the wine, a sheepish grin on his face. I hesitated, knowing I should probably send him home, but the storm was raging and he looked genuinely miserable. "Come in, I'll grab you a towel." As he dried off, I poured us each a glass of wine. "You really didn't have to come over," I said as we sat down. He shrugged. "Didn't feel like sitting in the dark. Besides, your company's better than staring."
At the wall. The storm outside seemed to amplify the tension between us. The sound of rain against the windows, the flicker of candlelight when the lights dimmed for a moment.
It all felt too intimate, too close. We talked, the conversation flowing like always, but this time there was an edge to it, a weight to his words. At one point, Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. "You know," he said, his voice low,
"I've never met anyone like you. You're smart, funny, and you don't even realize how incredible you are." I froze, my heart pounding. "Marcus, he interrupted, leaning back and running a hand through his hair. "I know you're married. I'm not—"
trying to cross any lines, but I can't help how I feel. His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I should have shut it down, told him to leave, reminded him and myself of the boundaries we were supposed to respect. But instead I sat there, unable to look away. "I don't know what to say," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rain. "You don't have to say anything," Marcus said, standing up. I needed to be honest with you." He walked toward the door, his hand on the knob. "I'm sorry if I've made things complicated. That was never my intention." "Marcus, wait," I said, standing without even thinking. He turned, and for a moment it felt like the whole world stopped. The storm, the tension, the unspoken feelings. It all came crashing down around us. Marcus hesitated, his hand still on the doorknob. "If you tell me to leave, I will," he said, quietly. "But if there's even a part of you that feels what I feel, just say the word." I stared at him, my heart in my throat, knowing that whatever I said next would change everything. The air between us was thick, the weight of his words pressing down on me. My mind screamed for me to stop this, to say the right thing, to draw the line. I knew we were dangerously close to crossing, but instead of speaking, I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the rain outside. Marcus didn't move. He just stood by the door, waiting, giving me the space to decide. His restraint only made it harder. He wasn't pressuring me, wasn't pushing, he was just there. "I can't," I finally whispered, my voice trembling. "This isn't right." "I know," he said softly, cutting me off. "I know it's not, but that doesn't change how I feel." He took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. "I'm not asking for anything. I needed you to know." I couldn't breathe. My mind was a whirl of emotions, guilt, fear, confusion, and something else I didn't want to name. I felt trapped between what I knew was right and what my heart was screaming for me to do. "Marcus, we can't do this," I said, finally finding my voice. "We haven't done anything," he said, his tone steady but his eyes filled with something raw. "But tell me honestly, if he wasn't in the picture, would things be different?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to lie, to say no, to tell him that nothing would ever change, but I couldn't. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely audible. Marcus nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "That's all."
I needed to hear. He turned back toward the door, his hand tightening on the knob. "Good night, Evelyn." "Good night, Marcus," I whispered, watching as he walked out into the storm, his figure disappearing into the darkness.
I closed the door and leaned against it, tears streaming down my face. What had I done? What was I doing? The storm raged on outside, matching the turmoil inside me. I knew I just dodged a bullet, or maybe I hadn't, because even though nothing had happened, the feelings were still there, lingering in the air like the scent of rain.